My marriage didn't collapse in a single night. It cracked where I least expected, right between love and blame. For years, I thought my role was to keep everything together, to be the calm in the storm. And when she finally told me what her brother-in-law had done to her, I became exactly that: the medic, the fixer, the husband who carried her pain as if it were my own. But one night, when I opened up about what that same man had done to me as a child, she gave me a sentence I will never forgive. It wasn't shouted in anger, it wasn't spat out in cruelty. It was spoken almost softly, like a fact, and it landed harder than anything else I've ever heard. That sentence didn't just wound me. It rewrote our marriage, and it forced me to choose between protecting her and protecting the boy I once was. I grew up in a house where silence was a survival skill. My father was gone before I was old enough to remember him properly. Prison took him away. My mother did her best, but between exhaustion and bills, there wasn't much left for noticing. And into that gap stepped people who were more dangerous than they looked. My sister's husband was one of them. Outwardly, he was charming. He knew how to make adults laugh, how to win over crowds, how to seem like the guy you'd trust at a barbecue. To me, though, he was different. He'd linger too close, say things that made my skin crawl, test boundaries in ways no one else seemed to notice. I was 12 when I realized his attention wasn't just teasing, it was targeted. I tried to speak up. Once, with a girlfriend years later, I mentioned something he'd done. She wrinkled her nose and said, "That's weird," and then changed the subject. Other times, I got silence, or worse, excuses. Eventually, I learned to keep it buried. If no one wanted to listen, why should I keep tearing myself open? By the time I met my wife, I had perfected the art of being useful. I could read her moods before she even named them. She told me once that I made her feel safe, and I clung to that like a badge of honor. I thought maybe this was my redemption. If I couldn't protect myself as a child, at least I could protect her as my partner. Our marriage looked solid from the outside. Shared routines, organized calendars, quiet evenings where we'd laugh at dumb TV shows. But underneath, there was a hum, like a machine running too hot. Every time her sister's husband's name came up, I felt it. And every time, I pushed it down. I didn't know that silence had an expiration date. And when it finally ran out, everything we'd built together would be tested in a way I never imagined. It was a Tuesday, one of those forgettable ones built from errands and notifications. The dishwasher hummed, my phone buzzed with work messages, and my wife sat on the edge of our bed as if the mattress might give her answers I couldn't. She didn't look at me right away. Her hands twisted together, restless, like she was trying to wring the words out of her skin. I thought she was going to tell me something about bills, or maybe that her sister had called again. Nothing in the air warned me that the next 10 seconds would split our life into before and after. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and deliberate. "For years ago, your brother-in-law raped me." The sentence detonated in my chest. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. My first instinct wasn't disbelief, it was devastation. The air changed texture, heavier, harder to move through. I wanted to vomit, to scream, to break every wall in the house. Instead, I did what I've always done. I locked myself into the role of caretaker. I slid onto the bed, pulled the blanket around her shoulders, poured every ounce of steadiness I had into my voice. I repeated the words that manuals and therapists recommend, the words survivors deserve to hear. "I believe you. You're not alone. It wasn't your fault. I'm here." She crumbled against me, sobbing into my chest. My shirt was soaked, but I didn't move. I didn't allow myself to feel anything except the responsibility to hold her together. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. That night, I found her a trauma-informed therapist, someone with experience handling cases like this. I filled out the intake forms while she sat silently on the couch, staring into the middle distance. I handled the logistics because that's what I knew how to do. Be useful. Be steady. But when the lights went out, when the house was quiet again, the darkness pressed against me like a second skin. The thought I had buried for years clawed its way back up. I knew. Not the facts, not the details, but the feeling. The reason I always avoided being alone with that man. The way my stomach had dropped when he stood too close, or whispered something that sounded like a joke, but wasn't. Lying there in bed, listening to my wife's uneven breaths, I whispered a truth I hadn't said out loud in years. "He hurt me too." The words disappeared into the dark, swallowed whole. She didn't stir. Maybe she didn't hear. Maybe I hadn't even meant to say it out loud. But it was out now, trembling in the air, and I knew sooner or later it would have to be spoken directly to her. And when it was, nothing in our marriage would ever feel the same. I thought revealing my past would make us allies. I didn't know it would make me her target. The days after her confession felt like walking across a frozen lake. Every step cautious, every sound amplified. I became her shadow, making tea, adjusting blankets, checking the locks twice before bed. I asked less, anticipated more. I thought if I could carry her through the storm, maybe we'd both come out whole. Her therapist became a lifeline. Twice a week, she'd sit across from a woman who knew how to hold space for shattered truths. I'd wait in the car or pace around the block, trying not to imagine the words spilling into that quiet office. When she came out, sometimes she looked lighter, sometimes heavier. I learned not to ask which. I found my own therapist too, though it felt selfish at first. I told him I didn't want to make this about me. He said it already was about me, whether I admitted it or not. He named things I'd never had language for. Hypervigilance, codependency, fawning. He said my whole identity was built around anticipating danger and neutralizing it before it exploded. It was like someone reading my diary out loud when I hadn't realized I'd written one. At home, I tiptoed through invisible tripwires. A smell, a sound, a phrase on TV. Any of them could send her spiraling. Once, a stranger walked past us at the grocery store wearing the same cologne her brother-in-law used. She froze mid-step, her face draining of color. I felt my chest seize too, like my body remembered before my brain did. Later that night, she asked why I'd gone stiff at the same time she did. I swallowed hard, the words like gravel in my throat. Because he used to do things. Not what he did to you. But when I was 12, he started grooming me. I didn't know that word back then. I just knew I hated the way he touched my shoulder, the jokes that weren't jokes, the way I always felt like prey. She went very still, her eyes fixed on me, unblinking, as if trying to decide what category to place me in now. For a moment, I thought I saw recognition, like two survivors acknowledging each other. But then something else flickered, confusion, maybe even resentment. I stumbled to fill the silence. I never told anyone, not really. Once or twice I hinted, but people brushed it off. They thought I was exaggerating, being dramatic. Eventually I just stopped. She nodded slowly, but her expression didn't soften. It was as if she'd filed the information away, not as shared pain, but as evidence. I told myself it was shock, processing, that she needed time to let my words settle. We were on the same side, weren't we? We had both been hurt by the same predator. Surely this would bring us closer. Surely she would see me as someone who understood her in a way no one else could. But deep down, in the quiet part of me that always knew when a storm was coming, I felt the ground start to shift. I thought I'd given her another reason to trust me. I didn't realize I'd just handed her a weapon. Arguments don't always start with fire. Sometimes they creep in sideways, through the cracks of ordinary life. For us, it began with dishes. I was tired, she was distracted, and suddenly the kitchen felt too small for both of us. Words sharpened, tone shifted, and then, like a blade sliding free of its sheath, she said it. Sometimes I blame you. The words hung there, so calm, so measured, I almost thought I'd misheard. But her eyes didn't waver. If you'd spoken up back then, she continued, maybe he wouldn't have hurt me. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't spit out in rage. It was delivered with the quiet precision of someone stating a fact, like the weather or the time of day. And yet it cut deeper than anything else she could have said. For a moment, I couldn't move. The plate in my hands suddenly weighed 100 pounds. I could hear my pulse in my ears, a roar of disbelief. I did speak up. I said finally, my voice raw. Not as a kid. I didn't have the words then. But later, when I was dating someone, I told her. She shrugged it off. I told a friend. He said I was overreacting. Everyone looked away. No one wanted to see it. Her jaw tightened. I'm not saying it's your fault. You just did. The silence that followed was worse than yelling. She looked at me like I'd just exposed something ugly, something she didn't want reflected back at her. Maybe my pain was too close to hers. Maybe admitting I had been a victim too blurred the neat lines she wanted between us. I'm angry, she whispered. At him, at myself, at the world. And yes, at you. Because if you'd spoken sooner. I slammed the plate down on the counter. Not hard enough to break, but hard enough to make us both flinch. I was 12. My voice cracked, the words ripped out of me. 12 years old. You were 20 when it happened to you. You had words, You had a choice. I didn't. Her face crumpled, but not in regret, more like frustration. As if my defense only made me guilty in a different way. The room went quiet again, but this time the quiet wasn't safety. It was judgment. Every second stretched, suffocating. I wanted to take the words back, to rewind, to make her see the absurdity of putting the weight of her trauma on the shoulders of a child I used to be. But the damage was done. The sentence had been spoken, and no matter how many times she might deny she meant it, I knew it was out there now, signed and sealed between us. And the worst part was, a piece of me believed her. I realized I wasn't just fighting with her. I was fighting with every adult who had ever chosen their comfort over my truth. You learn someone's triggers because you love them. You memorize them like emergency exits, because setting them off feels like betrayal. I thought she understood that about me too, at least after I told her. One of mine was simple. I couldn't stand being grabbed from behind. Even a casual squeeze on the shoulder could send me spiraling. I'd told her this more than once, with as much detail as I could bear to give. She'd nodded, serious, promising she'd never do it. And then, one evening, she did. It wasn't malicious at first glance. She came up behind me while I was making coffee, laid her hand on my shoulder like it was nothing. But my body didn't care about intentions. My chest tightened, my stomach lurched, and I jerked forward so fast the mug hit the counter with a crack. She froze, then gave a little laugh. "Oh God, sorry, I forgot." I nodded stiffly, trying to swallow it down. "Just, please don't." She promised again. But 2 days later, it happened again. And this time, it wasn't clumsy or forgetful. It felt deliberate, like she wanted to test me, or worse, like she wanted to prove something. My reaction was instant. Heart racing, skin buzzing, an old fear wrapping around me like barbed wire. "Why?" I managed to choke out. Her face shifted between guilt and irritation. "I don't know. I was upset, and She cut herself off, shook her head. "I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to." But the line between accident and weapon is thinner than most people realize. And my body couldn't tell the difference. In therapy, I tried to make sense of it. My therapist leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen, and said, "Boundaries aren't requests. They're agreements. If she breaks them, whether on purpose or not, it's still harm. The question is, what will you do about it?" That night, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote out rules on a scrap of paper. Not romantic vows, not poetic lines, rules. No using the other person's trauma as a weapon. No if only you had sentences. No breaking clearly stated boundaries, even in anger. If harm happens, repair first, explain later. I slid the paper across the table to her the next morning. She read it in silence. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "I agree with all of this," she said. Her voice sounded flat, rehearsed, like someone repeating lines for a play. For the rest of that week, she stuck to the script. No touching without asking. No pointed words. The house felt gentler, almost peaceful. But peace built on compliance isn't peace at all. It's waiting. I mistook her silence for healing, not realizing it was only the calm before the next storm. For a while, life smoothed itself out into something that looked almost normal. We made routines out of survival. Morning coffee on the porch, phones face down after 8, TV shows that made us laugh at the right moments. The laughter startled me at first, like a sound that didn't belong in the house anymore, but I welcomed it. I wanted so badly to believe we were climbing back. The list of rules I'd written sat folded in the drawer by the fridge, almost sacred. She never mentioned it, but for days she followed it to the letter. No backhanded remarks, no uninvited touches, no veiled blame. It was like she'd signed a truce with me, and for the first time in weeks, I let my shoulders drop. One evening, we cooked together, music playing low in the background. She chopped vegetables, I stirred the pot. For a moment, I could pretend we were just another couple on just another night. I remember thinking, maybe we'll be okay. But peace built on fear never holds. It started with something small. A disagreement about laundry, about who had forgotten to fold what. The words didn't matter. What mattered was how quickly her face tightened, how fast the temperature in the room shifted. As I turned to walk away, to give both of us space, her hand shot out and landed squarely on my shoulder. From behind. Exactly the way I'd begged her not to. My body reacted before I did. Muscles locked, my vision blurred, my pulse hammered so loud I could hear it in my teeth. I jerked away, spinning on her with wide eyes. She gasped, then frowned. I said I was sorry. I hadn't spoken yet. My mouth was still trying to catch up with my nervous system. You keep saying it. I managed, my voice trembling with anger I hadn't planned to unleash. You don't keep meaning it. Her expression hardened. This is all so hard, she snapped, as if that excused it. I shook my head. Being hurt isn't a license to hurt me. The air thickened. She crossed her arms. I crossed the room. 2 doors slammed that night, one for each of us. Hers out of frustration, mine out of survival. Behind my door, I wrote another line beneath the old rules. If she says this sentence again, leave. Not to punish, to live. I stared at that note until the words blurred. For the first time, the possibility of walking away didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like rescue. But still, a small part of me clung to hope. I wanted to believe she would see what she was doing, that she would stop, that we could fix this without blowing everything apart. I was wrong. The next time she crossed the line, it wouldn't be with her hands. It would be with words sharp enough to end us. We sat at the dining table like 2 diplomats sent to negotiate after a war. No TV, no phones, no distractions. Just 2 people with nothing left to hide behind. I started because I had to. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. I can't carry your anger at me for what he did. I won't carry blame for being a scared kid. I was 12. I didn't have the words, the power, the audience. I tried later, and no one listened. I won't let you rewrite that into my fault. She stared at her hands, thumbs pressed together so tightly they turned white. I don't want to blame you, she whispered. But you did, I said softly. And once words like that are spoken, they don't vanish. They stick. They echo. They cut deeper than screaming ever could. Her eyes flicked up, wet but defiant. I'm angry at myself. For not telling you sooner. For letting it happen to me. And when I look at you, sometimes I see the version of my life that could have been different if you, had stopped him first. The sentence hit me like a second strike. My chair scraped back against the floor. Don't, I said, louder than I intended. Don't put his crime on the child I was. Don't rewrite history to give your pain a scapegoat. I loved you enough to listen when you told me the worst thing that ever happened to you. Love me enough not to weaponize the worst thing that ever happened to me. The silence between us stretched, sharp as glass. I could see the conflict in her face. Remorse wrestling with defensiveness, love tangling with rage. Finally, she broke. I don't want to be this version of me, she admitted, voice cracking. The one who hurts you in the same breath I ask you to save me. Then don't, I said simply. Her tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. I'm afraid that if I stop blaming you, I'll have to blame myself. For the years I stayed silent. For not warning you. For not protecting anyone. Or, I countered, leaning forward. You could put the blame where it belongs. On him. On the adults who chose comfort over truth. On the people who turned away when they should have listened. Not on us. Not on a kid. Not on the woman you were trying to survive. Her lips trembled. She looked like she wanted to agree, but didn't know how. We sat there, breathing in sync, but miles apart. 2 choices hung in the air between us. Heavy and undeniable. Commit to healing, with rules we both honor, with a therapist to hold us accountable. Or watch our marriage corrode under the weight of misdirected rage. I can't hear that sentence again, I told her. My tone was flat, final. If you say it again, something in me will never come back. And then it won't be about fixing us. It'll be about saving myself. She nodded once. A small gesture that could have meant agreement or surrender. I couldn't tell which. 2 days later, her phone buzzed with a family group chat. She mouthed his name, and I braced myself to see which side she'd choose. Her phone lit up on the counter. A family group chat. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I saw the name before she angled the screen away. His name. The one that poisoned every room we shared. She didn't type right away. Just stared at the glow, thumb hovering, as if pressing one key might detonate something neither of us could contain. I waited, my chest tight, every muscle ready for fallout. Finally, she exhaled and whispered, almost to herself, I want to ask if anyone else knew. If anyone else went through it. I wanted that too, desperately. But I also knew how dangerous those threads could be. Families protect predators with silence, with gaslighting, with don't rock the boat. If she opened that door, she might find truth, or another wall of denial. Then ask, I said carefully. But don't expect an answer that heals you. Don't pin your hope on people who've already failed us once. She didn't answer. Instead, She turned to me, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. I need space. From all of this. From you. Even for a little while. The old me would have panicked, begged her not to say that, promised anything to keep her close. But the man sitting at that table had learned something in therapy. Sometimes the only way to survive is to step back before you're pushed. Okay, I said. Her eyebrows furrowed. That's it. Just okay. I'll stay with a friend, I told her. I love you, but I can't live in a house where my boyhood is on trial. I won't. It startled her. Maybe she expected resistance or more caretaking. Instead, I packed a small bag, quietly, methodically, like preparing for a trip I hadn't chosen. The weight of each shirt folded was heavier than it should have been. At the door, she reached out and touched my wrist. Not from behind, not suddenly, front-facing, announced. I don't blame you, she said. Her voice trembled, almost breaking. I wanted to believe that those 4 words could undo the others, that they could erase the scar of sometimes I blame you. But words don't cancel each other out, they layer. And once spoken, they never disappear. I hope you mean that, I whispered. Because if you do, maybe we still have a chance. Her tears finally fell, silent, tracking down her cheeks. I walked out before I could reach to wipe them. The night air was cold, sharper than I expected. My chest hurt, but it was a clean hurt, the kind that comes with clarity. For the first time, I wasn't leaving out of fear. I was leaving to protect myself. The house behind me was dark, the door closed but not locked. A part of me hoped it would open again with new rules, new honesty, new respect. Another part of me was already learning how to walk without looking back. A week apart would decide everything, whether we were repairing or just pausing the damage. The week apart stretched longer than it looked on the calendar. Each day felt like a test I hadn't studied for. At my friend's place, I slept on a lumpy couch, stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m., and wondered if distance would kill us or save us. We both kept our individual therapy appointments. I added a new one, couples counseling, but only with a trauma-informed specialist. The rules were clear this time. No blame shifting, no weaponizing the past, no crossing boundaries we'd already put in writing. When we showed up together, the air was thick with things unsaid. In that room, she spoke words I never thought I'd hear. It wasn't your fault. She said it slowly, like untying a knot, repeating it until the syllables stopped sounding foreign in her own mouth. She admitted that blaming me was a way of deflecting, of avoiding the mirror of her own silence. It didn't erase the pain of what she'd said before, but it mattered. At home, she said it again without prompting. Not as a performance, not because someone told her to, but because she needed to. And each time, the weight inside my chest loosened a little more. We also told the truth to people who needed to hear it. Some apologized, stumbling over their own shame. Others stayed quiet, too invested in pretending nothing had happened. The man who hurt us both still exists, still walks around in a world that hasn't punished him the way it should. I can't change that, but I can change what I allow inside my own walls. Our marriage isn't what it was, and maybe it never will be. We didn't promise forever after this. We promised honesty, even if it meant walking away. Some days we are close, almost tender, like 2 hands protecting a fragile flame. Other days we feel like strangers trying to rebuild something on scorched ground. But here's what I know now. I can love her and still protect the child I was. I can grieve what we almost lost without abandoning myself again. The seam that cracked our marriage showed me something I should have learned long ago. Being useful is not the same as being loved. And survival is not the same as living. So if someone tries to hand you their pain wrapped in your old shame, don't accept it. Hand it back. Name it correctly. And walk toward the version of yourself that finally knows the difference.